But this idea that I'm going to change, this is diabolical future faking, because this isn't just about some future event. This is about the only thing you have ever wanted in a relationship with a narcissist. The only thing you've ever wanted. What is that? That they would change, that they'd finally get it and they would change. Today, we're going to talk about that sort of specialness we feel when we're chosen by the narcissist, which is dangerous. Narcissistic folks are like magicians, aren't they? They capitalize on trauma bonds and being great and then being awful. And so in these relationships, we're always off balance. We're either making apologies, afraid they will leave us, or basking in their generosity and charm. Their charisma and charm and grandiosity make them exciting and compelling. Narcissistic people are so skilled at drawing us in. And just when we're in, just when they got us, that's when they kind of ignore us, which only and sort of sadly makes us want them even more. That's their magician-y quality. If you had narcissistic parents, think back to the challenges of at some level knowing something wasn't right, but desperately wanting to be chosen, being special to them. It's all any child wants, right? To be noticed and cherished by their parents and caregivers. So then that idea of being special enough to be chosen absolutely drives the allure of the love bomb. Not only do they choose us, but they really go through lots of trouble for us and tell us that they love us and miss us when we aren't there, or so they say. If they choose us, and I think we feel like no matter who chooses us, narcissist or not, but if they choose us, if we're chosen, then we're special. I'm always struck by how inaccessible narcissistic people can make themselves. They may love bomb and pay attention and charm and chariz their way through situations. And everyone just feels like they have their hands up saying, "Oh, pick me, pick me." So even when the red flags start popping up, even when our smart brains tell us this person doesn't seem safe or healthy or good, we still feel special when they choose us. We don't step back and say, nah, too many red flags for my taste here. No, we lean in and we feel special. And the narcissistic folks are almost counting on that. In fact, I do think that, and I've said this repeatedly, that I think that, and they are, narcissistic relationships are an indoctrination process. And this process leaves us feeling that if they choose us, then that's what makes us special. Listen, cult leaders do this all the time. They kind of make themselves deliberately remote, above it all, special, magical, and at the same time, they make themselves really accessible. The people in the cult want to be the chosen ones, the favorites. And in some cults, it becomes very abusive, usually becomes very abusive, with a cult leader misusing this power, resulting in things like coercive sexual relationships, coercive financial relationships, you name it. And yet, to be the chosen one in those systems can feel special. I think that's an extreme version of it, but I think that's in all narcissistic systems. This can happen in family systems as well. Something about the specialness of being chosen by the very parent or family member that even a few hours you were talking about as being toxic. And these cycles don't end in childhood, even in adulthood. People are still angling to be the one that's picked. Trauma bonding and cognitive dissonance can both explain in part why this happens. The hope of having a parent who is a hero and who chooses us. It is the grandiosity a child sometimes needs to feel safe that, ooh, the heroic parent has chosen me. But when that parent actually is not a hero and is rather an egocentric and invalidating person, then the desire to keep them in that hero role means that the child will foster that image in the parent and jump on the rare moments when the parent is actually somewhat present or behaving well, and then revel in those brief moments that they feel special. Maybe they take you out to get a soda or a milkshake or take you out on an errand. That moment felt chosen and then special. It's breadcrumbing, plain and simple, but with a child. That dynamic extends to the workplace as well. The tyrannical boss who then anoints a person in the workforce. You do good work. I want to work with you. Right? There's a little bit of a specialness to that. Oh, the big bad boss wants to work with me. Even as you know that you are walking into a can't win abusive space with this leader or manager, maybe you don't know it, but most people could see it coming. Hope keeps us alive, and cognitive dissonance means that we rationalize it. Maybe I'll get through to them. Maybe I really will convince them. That specialness of being chosen by someone who may play on those core wounds, those trauma bonds, can then leave any of us being less discerning and losing ourselves in the process. We can also see this specialness paradigm play out in things like hazing rituals or exacting and competitive or audition or application processes in any kind of organization. So a person, you have applications and interviews and lots of hoop jumping. If I go through all of this and they pick me to be in their club, then I am special, right? And people may miss or choose to ignore red flags because getting to this point, getting in, being the chosen one was what it was all about, right? Many people will look at a lifetime or years of work and not want to walk away from something that they worked so hard to get to. So when it gets toxic, and especially when there's no recourse, people may get entrenched because they've still felt special for being the person who was chosen to have that experience. This specialness dynamic really undercuts one of the most important defenses in navigating a narcissistic world, which, like I said, is discernment. That infantile need to be special, which is universal, comes up against a rather adult ability that we all have to discern. And it's an unfair fight. Infantile wins every time. We want to be picked by the tyrant to finally have the moment where we get to work it through and get it right. We may not have been chosen or special as children, but damn it, maybe this time with this person, yep, gonna get it right. It's not gonna happen. It's not because of you, it's because of them. It's a Herculean mental effort to recognize red flags and not get pulled into the specialness swamp. It can mean lots of self-talk. Not good for me. You got to keep saying, not good for me. This is not good for me. This is not good for me. I'm not falling for this trick again. It's like walking away from a game of 3-card Monte in the street or a slot machine. Like you think you're going to win it this time. You're never going to win it. You can't. And their magic, that narcissistic magic, is that when they choose us, we feel special. We lose that discernment. It's on us to do the work to break that cycle. Specialness should not come from being picked out of the crowd by someone who is invalidating and entitled. It's something that all of us deserved to develop from childhood. Most of us didn't get it. And it's on us as adults, as individuals, to figure that out for ourselves so we aren't as vulnerable for their game and for the harm that comes in the process. I do know that some of you may have watched this video and said, there's also a more gruesome, harmful, traumatic element of that specialness dynamic that we see in families where there's abuse. I'm very aware of that idea that the grooming process, especially when a child or a young person is groomed for abuse, that they are really targeted as special. I'm aware of that dynamic. That is not what this video is about, but I don't want people to watch it and say, hey, wait a minute, are you aware that this is part of that abuse cycle? Very, very aware of it. I'm talking about that sense as adults, even most pointedly, that when we're chosen, whether love bombing, work, even in adult familial relationships, that somehow being chosen, even being chosen by someone toxic, in fact, even more so being chosen by someone toxic, there's a specialness that comes out. Be aware of that, because that can really lower these sorts of the shade across our face where we miss the discernment, but I am very aware of that other dynamic. And I wanted to make sure I made that point so anyone watching that doesn't feel as though they weren't heard around that one. So you're in a narcissistic relationship, and when that relationship turns dark, and it always turns dark, and you see it for the invalidating mess it was, many survivors I've talked to have said, I kind of feel gross or bad. Like, I enjoyed the love bombing part. Not even that people were like, ooh, I love the gifts and I love the fancy stuff, but they loved the sense, all of us love that sense of being desired. Now, desiring other people is something that narcissistic folks do better than anyone. When they aren't making you feel bad, they can make you feel really good. Saying things like, you're so special, you're the most beautiful person in the world, I'm so lucky to be walking down the street with you, you're so cool, you're so awesome. And they cement it just as you're finding yourself getting so lost in the haze of how good it all feels, feeling so attractive, feeling so desirable. They pull back. And now you're craving this desire. You'll do anything to get it back. So then you put up with more and more of their bad behavior. And you see that cycle, right? So when people look back at the relationship and they're asked, how did you find yourself drawn into this mess in the first place? This person's a jerk. What attracted you to them? Why did you keep it going when the red flags were popping up? You know all the survivor questions. Many survivors will say, or won't say, and they'll feel guilty or ashamed about it, but they'll say, it felt good. But again, and then feel guilty or ashamed for that. But it's true. The self-shaming and the guilt for being a human being is a big part of the challenges of survivorship from these relationships. I've yet to meet the person who doesn't like to be complimented or to be with someone who leaves them feeling attractive and desirable. That's human. And for people with trauma-bonded histories, the idea that someone could be all in with them and then at times disappear or be invalidating is actually the roadmap for love that many of us received early in our lives. Most survivors of narcissistic relationships have trained themselves to subsist on emotional breadcrumbs for a long time, like emotional camels in a way. Now, the dynamic can be greatly magnified if the narcissistic person you were involved with gets involved in something more scandalous. They break the law, they harm someone else, they behave badly in a job. Because then people are even looking at you more sideways, thinking like, why were you with this person who does these bad things? Survivors will even question it for themselves and will look back at the beginning when the narcissistic person did leave them feeling special and attractive, beautiful, chosen. And then that can really leave survivors feeling foolish for falling for a con. But it was real to you, and that makes it real. I have to remind all of you that no matter how much you may know about narcissism or even psychopathy, you still get played even with that information. Because if our red flag radar was that sensitive, we would never get much past hello with a lot of people. And we aren't robots. We bring our own vulnerabilities in, our sense of not being good enough, our anxiety about reading a social situation accurately, our fears, our histories. And so with all of that, if someone is being complimentary and sort of seemingly swept away by us, I know, as it is, I'm already the anti-Cupid by saying, run away from too much romance, run away from charisma. But even I can't say, oh, if someone is saying something nice to you, then run away. I'm not going to say it, it's not true. So there's only so tight that red flag radar can be. All of us deserve to be seen and loved and cherished and desired at some point in our lives. And unfortunately, not enough of us are. So when narcissists hand out desire, it's like them passing out bottles of ice water in the desert. We want it, we need it, so we take it, and wanting that and getting swept away with that, that's human. Many times when I've worked with clients who are sort of doing the post-mortem of their narcissistic relationships, they will literally have a look of disgust on their faces when they are describing the story of their own, how they were love bombed. I don't like that for them. It was real when it was real. And part of healing is accepting and being compassionate about our histories, even when we look back and say, how did I fall for that? you didn't see the rest of the story. I mean, listen, Jurassic Park seemed like a good idea until the T-Rex and the Velociraptor came to the party. If it was all Stegosauruses, Jurassic Park would have been a really fun place. Now, if anything, the red flag we need to pay attention to is not the compliments and the desire and the cherishing, but rather the hot, cold, on, off, in, out, cherishing you, and then the next day not returning your texts. And then when you say, okay, nah, this is not for me, they then say, oh, I'm just afraid of commitment. You're so special. Give me another chance. Nope. The running hot and cold is a sign that the trauma bond is in the house. And if they withdraw, instead of clearly communicating about their fears of commitment, that's its own red flag. It's not limited to just narcissistic people, but that pattern isn't good for anyone. Wanting to be cherished and valued and seen for your beauty or your value, it's not foolish or silly, it's human. Yes, the story may play out badly at the end, but when it was real, it was real. And you made the courageous leap of faith into a new relationship. Healing is all about not shaming yourself and not looking back on the love bombing phase with disdain and contempt for yourself. The only path forward to healing from these relationships is to be able to look at your story and recognize that at that time, not knowing all you were about to learn, you did what you did in good faith. But if you shame that part of yourself, it can make it really difficult to let yourself in some ways off the hook and allow yourself to be taken care of so that the next time you put your hat out in the ring, you are cherishing yourself enough that you won't put up with that hot, cold nonsense that is so classically the narcissistic relationship. So let's talk about the pullback. The pullback is one of the most primary tricks in the narcissistic person's relationship book. And it comes up most often and most profoundly in intimate relationships. However, it plays out in every narcissistic relationship. Every one of you has experienced this, or frankly, you wouldn't be watching this channel. What's that trick? It's something called the pullback. What is it? Let me use an example. So you're in a new relationship. Maybe it's you're being love bombed. Maybe you're just really into the person. You're relaxing, enjoying them. Maybe even being more open and vulnerable. And then just as you start getting more interested, bam, the pullback. It's kind of an evil genius maneuver because most people want to keep the good stuff, that love bombing stuff going. So it puts you in this position of what can I do or say to get them back in? You wait for them to text back or call when they stop doing it as much. You hope to heaven that they don't flake on your plans again or reschedule. So then, after all that flakiness, when they show up again, you're so relieved that you would sell the keys to the kingdom of heaven to make sure that they don't pull back again. After the pullback, when they go away and come back, you're more likely to be compliant, less likely to make a demand, or to do anything that could lead to the pullback happening again. Each time the pullback happens, you may panic a little. It can feel like abandonment. It can feel like rejection. So you react to it that way. You don't want the rejection or abandonment, especially if you're really into this new person. So each time they do it, and then they come back, you become more and more yielding and don't even begin to question them in any way because you don't want them to pull back again. The pullback is tactical because they are getting rewarded for it. Each time they do it, the other person in the relationship gives in more and more and may even throw in some other stuff like validation to keep them around. You may even make pointed sacrifices or give the narcissist anything they want to keep them from doing the pullback again. This can be part of why narcissistic relationships so often move too quickly. You may find yourself moving in too fast or not staying at work too late, believing that the more you are with them, the less that they'll pull back because you're always there, and that's not true. They'll still find a way to pull back on you. Frankly, pulling back is an old sales maneuver. The salesperson kind of walks away, becomes disinterested, doesn't take you as seriously as a customer. I mean, it's got to be somewhere in sales training that these folks are taught how to capitalize on our trauma bonds. And lots of people in these sales situations, for some unfortunate reason, want to get back that salesperson who is now walking away with their special deal. And then the salesperson knows they've got you. Or the salesperson may play the game of looking a little hurt and rejected, and that can play on the pleasers out there too. But the pullback pulls on our need to please, our fears of rejection and our abandonment. And no joke, as I was preparing this video, I took a break to check my email. And someone was doing an email sales blast. I guess I didn't respond to it. Then they tried the pullback. Since we haven't heard from you, we just have to assume that you're taking a different direction than us. Oh, Lord, for someone like me, that plays on my pleasy trauma bonds. I'd always want to respond. And that's why I have really wonderful people who answer my emails. It's kind of a shame we can't have people do that same thing for us in our trauma bonded first dates in the same way. Now, the pullback doesn't just happen in narcissistic, romantic, or intimate relationships. It can happen in friendships too, and still feel quite potent, especially if this is a new friend or if you rely on friends for social support and connection. The pullback is also a hallmark of toxic families. If you had narcissistic parents, you may recall them pulling back when you made any kind of demand, ask, of any kind. They might become cold or indifferent. You learned really quickly to not demand anything, to not need anything, ask anything, or do any of the things that would lead the parent to coldly withdraw. The attachment needs of a child are such that they can't afford to have the parent withdraw. So the narcissistic parent slowly trains the child to yield to everything the parent wants, because the parent knows that they can withdraw and that child is going to come right back into line. While it may not be as potent, these patterns can also happen at work, where a boss or other key player in the workplace may pull away when they perceive you are not in line with their agenda, and that may be experienced by you as a risk for your career, your position, or whatever's happening at work. But when it comes down to it, the pullback is the hallmark move of the intimate narcissistic relationship. It's an integral part of the construction of the trauma bond. You find yourself fighting to be in something toxic because the good days leave you wanting more, and the pulling back makes you want to fight for it. It feels gross to think that they're almost doing the equivalent of training you, but that is how the trauma bond works. They are gradually shaping you by playing on your vulnerabilities. So, what do you do about this? Well, you have to know it's a thing. And it also means unpacking your own core wounds around abandonment and rejection before you ever attempt to date or get into a new relationship. If these are core issues for you, then the pullback maneuver is going to have tremendous potency and pull you into a toxic dance. I am not naive enough to think that I can tell the world, hey, everyone, when someone pulls back, just let them go. But honestly, if you did that, it would work. Sadly, the pullback that the narcissist does is a test. They're trying to figure out if you're going to be patient or try to get them to notice you. And once you fall for it, then they know they have you on the hook. If you don't do it, so they pull back and you're like, forget it, it may raise a new problem because now they may double down and try to win you over. And then you may think you won because look, they're chasing me after the pullback. Not so quick, gang. That's a trap. Because then they will just wait longer next time before they do the pullback. And then you may be even more invested and fall for it. So the hardcore play with the pullback is that when someone does it, when they pull back, you don't try to win them back. You get into therapy or whatever you need to do to work through the abandonment issues, the trauma bonds of it all. And when they come skulking back, which they will, you may want to give it another spin. Okay, so let's do a little bit of tiger's cage here. Do it. But the next time they do the pullback, it's goodbye. I can see giving a little bit of margin of error for a decent person's commitment fears, but then only one more time if there is a second pullback. It is absolutely essential at that point you walk and don't get hoovered, because the longer you are resistant to them, the harder they're going to try. So when this narcissistic fool is having a message skywritten over your house, ignore it. The pullback is the core of the narcissistic courtship, and it sets the foundation for the trauma bond in a new relationship. So that means if you have an existing history of trauma-bonded relationships, the pullback will all but guarantee that those bonds will be cemented. So again, I have no doubt that some of you have been in those relationships where it's going great, love bomb, magical connection, woohoo, yay, I love this. And then bang, they pull back. You don't hear from them. They don't text you back. They don't call you back. And you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Before you ask yourself, what did you do? Start wondering, might this just be an example of the narcissistic pullback? But let's talk about hoovering. Hoovering, right? Again, it's that relapse, that moment of relapse in the healing process of narcissistic abuse. And frankly, it's a very human response to fall back in, a hope to work it through, a fantasy that somehow it can be different, an attempt to get it right, or a moment of weakness. So let's break down the 6, maybe even 7 phases of hoovering. Number 1, the "my life is awful without you, I was wrong" hoover. This could also be called the fantasy hoover. It's what all of us ever wanted to hear when we were in these relationships. I was bad, you are good, I don't deserve you, but I want to devote my life to loving you and making you happy. That's what we want to hear. We wanted to hear them say, I'm miserable without you. I cry, I'm sad, I can't stop thinking about you, right? That's the fantasy, that they would miss us that much. Hearing that, especially if it is early enough in your healing process, is dangerous. Actually, I am sure their life is awful without you in it, but they don't actually mean it in that good way. But they are going to make your life awful again if you let them back in. And when they say their life is awful without you, they don't mean it the way you want it to mean. In losing you, they lost supply. They lost a punching bag. They lost a source of regulation. That's what they mean. Do you really want that role again? Number 2 is the "please help me, things are so dire in my life" hoover. If they really can't get to you, you really block them, you don't respond, they double down. They'll say strange things like people are after me, or I'm not safe, or I feel like I could hurt myself. They might ask for money. I just need a little money because I'm in a tough spot since things ended. You are not emergency services, nor are you social services. If they're in danger, then tell them to call 911 or call it for them if you're actually concerned about their welfare. Narcissists do this because they know it works. They know you have empathy. You know you once cared about this person. You may still. And frankly, you don't want to live with the regret of it all. You're nice, so you want to help. And in the blink of an eye, by reaching out and offering to help, you may be back in the mess and on the chain financially, with time or with mental energy. If you truly believe someone's at harm, it's not your responsibility. You should really call emergency services. Number 3, the "I have changed" hoover. No, they haven't. So if those are the grounds on which you are taking them back, it's a false assumption. The amount of change necessary could never have been enacted in a brief period of time. They may tout having gone to therapy, life coaching, taking ayahuasca, a trip to the moon, whatever. It's easy for them to say they've changed. All probabilities against it having happened in a meaningful way, and especially if you're still struggling with your trauma bonds, this is a risky letting them back in, right? And then you're going to have to waste time in that entire cycle again and having to get out again. Number 4 is the "you think you are healed and can manage them this time" hoover. You may be, but they haven't changed. So let's say you are stronger and now you're much more understanding of trauma bonds and narcissism and all the rest. What does that look like? Was the sex really that good? Is anyone that attractive? Is it really worth taking them back? Your being stronger is great, and sure, you can radically accept to the ends of the earth.
But getting out was not easy. Healing was not easy. So when they come rolling around and your rationale is that I can handle it this time, I won't go deep, I will radically accept, okay. But then ask yourself, is that really a relationship? The number 5 kind of Hoover is the you are happy and I'm going to mess it up Hoover. This kind of hoovering is so big that it actually is its own video that's going to come out very soon. It might even come out tomorrow. They are allergic to your happiness. In fact, I would argue they are disgusted by your happiness, so they're going to come for it. They see your social media posts. They may talk to your friends. They know you're happy. Listen to that video that's about to come out, because this is a bigger topic, but it's real. Number 6 is the self-hoover. If you aren't ready to let them go, it's easy for you to go sniffing around, to look at their social media, to set up your schedule in a way that, oops, here we are running into each other at the gym at the same time, or to send some text to them yourself, or heaven forbid that you drunk text them. The trauma bonding means that these relationships are extremely confusing, and at times of loneliness or euphoric recall, it is easy to reach back out. Try not to do this. It often won't work, but if your timing is unfortunate, it might, and they'll start looping back into your life, or you may get caught into a one night or a one weekend hookup that leaves you feeling even worse. This is also tough because people may feel a sense of shame after doing this, and it makes the self-blame worse if this relationship you already got out of ends up having an Act 2 or an Act 3 or an Act 4. Hoovering is simply a part of the trauma-bonded cycle that can make these relationships feel like an eternal recurrence. Keep it in mind, because getting sucked back in is not only not good for you, it takes all of those cycles around self-blame and makes them far, far worse.
How many of you have had a narcissist in your life who promised to change? You finally hit the wall and you're like, I am done. And they said, no, I'll change. How many? Just let me know. Just say, yeah, that happened to me. Because it's probably happened to most of us, right? You hit that breaking point. So what happens? What do you do with that when the narcissist promises to change? And remember, please join us and subscribe to this channel, because again, you'll see from the comments that this community is amazing. You learn a lot, just as much from them as you learn from me. So let's talk about this. What do you do? What happens when the narcissist promises to change? In some ways, this is a riff on the future faking stuff, on the future faking video. Now, for those of you who haven't seen that, please remember that future faking is when the narcissist keeps you on the hook by promising something down the line. One day when we get married, one day when we travel the world, one day when I retire, one day when we have a baby. I mean, it's that kind of thing. One day. But this idea that I'm going to change, this is diabolical future faking, because this isn't just about some future event. This is about the only thing you have ever wanted in a relationship with a narcissist. The only thing you've ever wanted. What is that? That they would change, that they'd finally get it and they would change. Listen, if you have even gotten to a level in your relationship where this is the conversation about the need for change, then you may be doing better than most. Because most narcissists have zero insight. They see no need to change. And if anything, they may gaslight and rage at you in a way that leaves you feeling as though you're the one who needs to change. So the narcissist's promise to change is sort of, and typically is, their last-minute attempt at a reprieve. It's sort of a relationship Hail Mary pass. And it is all the more galling because it means that the narcissist knows that something needs to change. But what are the odds that they will do it? Pretty close to zero. Now, much like future faking, Promising that they will change is obviously the ultimate future fake. If you stick around, I will become the person you want me to be. In a narcissistic relationship, it's usually pretty clear what needs to change. For example, it may be that they need to stop cheating, or they need to stop sending shady, inappropriate texts to other people, or they need to stop leering over other women or men on social media, or they need to stop ignoring you when you speak, or they need to stop insulting your friends and your family, or they need to start communicating about being late or showing up, or they just need to generally stop being a jerk. You may have tried to ask them to do any one of these things in 1,000 different ways with the hope that they'll hear it and change. You may have even gone through the futile pursuit of something like couples therapy with a narcissist. And then, one day, you give up. You really give up. You give up, you're done. And the narcissist, because they do actually have a lot of sensitivity to abandonment, and they really have a distaste for losing, and their commitment to manipulation and their need for control, because they need to be the one in the driver's seat, will make you the promise that you had been asking for months or years. That day you're mentally checked out is the day they say, I will change. Now, this may manifest in many different ways. They may offer to go to therapy themselves. They may offer to go to sex addiction treatment or recovery groups. They may let you look at their phone every night. And trust me, my dears, they have a new phone hidden somewhere else. They may sit with you and scrub their Instagram. And that's the same deal as the phone. They have another Instagram. They will start doing the things you've always wanted. They'll show up on time. They'll stop working late so often. They'll stare into your eyes while you talk. And for a short while, they may even have appeared to turn a corner, to really be committed to getting it right. And those poor folks who are narcissistic may literally wear themselves to the point of exhaustion to get it right. And then, just as you exhale and put away your ideas of splitting up with them or moving out or going no contact, they'll slowly slide back to their old patterns. Now, some of you may be wondering, Dr. Ramani, in all your years of doing this stuff, have you ever seen a narcissist make the full 180 in a relationship? Become a truly changed person in a relationship? Interestingly, or maybe not so interestingly, the answer to that is no. I have never seen the 180. I've sometimes seen about a 60-degree change. They may keep committing some of their sins, but they might start getting a few other things a little bit more right. But it is as though once bad habits get set in a narcissistic relationship, they really aren't amenable to change. I have seen some situations in which individual narcissistic clients have made some pretty significant shifts, but they could not resuscitate the relationship. In that way, the hurts are just so deep. And this doesn't just happen in romantic relationships, this whole promise of, I will change for you. That's typically narcissists will give you that promise when they recognize that they're about to lose someone, or lose more than someone, or they're about to lose control of the situation. That's a common promise, because you can also see this in a family. It may be more rare in a family because the patterns are so set in stone in families because they're so ancient. You may also see this in the workplace. The toxic boss or the toxic colleague who just constantly encroaches on people's rights. And to save face or to save stock options or to salvage a public face, They may make tearful promises of being a changed man or a changed woman, or to commit every day to being better. And then they might go off to a treatment center for a little while or claim to be devoting time to their family, at which time they're probably strategizing a rebranding campaign. And then they're probably likely to make all those mistakes all over again with a new group of unwitting victims. It's a cautionary tale that plays out every single day. So, what do you do with this promise to get better that they give you? First of all, you do need to take some responsibility for falling for it. After years of being played, why would this promise be any different? They haven't kept any of their other promises. There is something intoxicating about finally putting your foot down and saying, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And you really feel strong in that statement. And then you finally hear the magic words that they're going to change for you, and you're feeling your power. That was the fantasy all along, wasn't it? But don't get so blinded by the fantasy that you fall for it. If you matter enough, even if you did move out or step away or set a big boundary, then they would commit to the work of being better, not for you, but because it's the right thing to do. Making this kind of change, this idea that they're going to change to win you back over, shifts it to the realm of manipulation rather than a meaningful commitment to real change. Promising you they will change is their final attempt at winning, to being able to maintain the status quo that gives them power and of flexing their muscle of control. If they haven't committed to changing yet, despite the million subtle ways you've asked for it, why would your ultimatum or your laying down the gauntlet all of a sudden be a catalyst for this big change? Frankly, even if we were to take a step out of the playbook of addiction and 12-step, that idea of hitting a rock bottom that may spearhead sobriety, that rock bottom is a very personal process for an addict. And doesn't happen because other people demand sobriety. It's because the addict finally faces it down. So if this kind of promise to change is thrown at you, don't let your fantasies run away with you. Don't let that childlike hope run away with you. Keep your eyes wide open. If they want to change, support their goal, and then step away and tell them that this may be a journey that they need to make by themselves. Then let them figure out this change out on their time. Don't let them figure it out on yours. They can do the hard work of therapy, of daily mindfulness, of reflecting of their impact on other people. Let them do that. That's a journey that they need to get through on their own, and not with enablers letting them off the hook, and that includes you. After the so-called change is over, then meet with this so-called new improved version of them and assess it yourself. If they actually saw the change through, not knowing if you were going to come back or not knowing if you were going to go be there or not, then honestly, that is something worth noting. And then it's on you to tentatively and very carefully re-enter a relational space with them if you choose. But please don't succumb to a false promise. That will only just keep this damaging cycle in place in perpetuity. And I want to say that again. If they make the promise to change, you don't have to reject them harshly and say, I don't believe you. You're a monster. You're never going to change. The right step then is to say, if you're really committed to becoming better, to becoming empathic, to being compassionate, to being kind, if you're really committed to that, then please go do that. set me free for a while. You go do that. And after you've gone on that journey, come back and talk to me. And if I'm here, we can talk. I have almost never, ever seen a narcissist agree to that. They want to keep you where they need you to get their supply and then play at making this change. Again, this is your life and your choices to make. But if you stick around and give them permission to make their change on your time, that's a change that ain't happening. So again, would love to hear from all of you whose narcissists promised to change for them and hear how it all turned out. Because if there were any success stories, those are good for us to hear as well. So thanks again for tuning in. Please subscribe to this channel, join this community, hit that bell, and get notifications every time we put out a new video. And if you happen to like this one, give us that thumbs up. Thanks again.